The Tang Dynasty, roughly 7th to the 10th century China, saw progress in many areas of life and left us a treasure trove of poetry. From this poetry come many sayings, proverbs, and aphorisms, which are still in popular usage. In other words, Tang and Song poetry is very much alive and kicking in China and the Chinese diaspora today, despite their origins so many centuries ago. This is why I call my series My China in Tang Poetry. It is in this poetry that I have come closest to finding my roots and my culture. And in my translations of them, I am sharing my findings with you. Poetry is a translation of feelings and thoughts into patterns of sound, sight, and sense. Translating poetry from one language, one culture, and one period in history into another language, another culture, another period is obviously not easy and presents many challenges, but it also presents many possibilities. This program, the title of this program, refers to these challenges and possibilities. In this program, we shall be giving voice and translation giving voice and translation interchangeably. You will be presented not only with classical Chinese poetry in modern English translation, but also many other kinds of translations, from poets lending their voices to other individuals or to a whole community or to a universal longing, to that of rendering the spirit or essence of one art form into another, to setting music to poems, and to that of expressing the feelings of a poem in one tradition into the music of another tradition. This last comes in the second part of the program after the Pi song. But first, Dr. Qi Gao and I would like to thank ACC's Asian American and Pacific Islander Director, Professor Lin Lau, whom you have just met, for this opportunity to share our passion with you today. Also, a reminder to please silence your cell phones and no applause till the end of the program, as we are trying to keep it to an hour. And a quick last word. When we come to the last three poems, the cello will come in after I introduce them, the poems, then you will hear the poems, and then the cello will come in again to say goodbye. So don't clap until you hear the cello again after I read. On March 21st, 2015, the UN issued 6 stamps to commemorate World Poetry Day. Li Bai's poem, Quiet Night Thoughts, 静夜诗, was one of them. Here it is on the screen that Li Bai and his poem in particular is chosen to represent all Chinese poetry is no surprise. Li Bai is one of 2 superstars of Tang Dynasty, of Tang poetry. The other is Du Fu, whom you will meet in a minute. Li Bai embodies the genius of Tang poetry, and this little poem is one that all Chinese children all over the world know. Li Bai left home early to pursue his career at the imperial court, and his journey to court was circuitous and colorful. That story is told in volume 1 of My China in Tang Poetry, called Superstars, over there. Quiet Night Thoughts was an early poem, written when he first left home and was homesick. Here are the 4 little lines that have lived through 14 centuries. The song that follows is a children's song, which Qi Wei learned from her 5-year-old daughter. She will sing it for you as she plays it on the cello after I read the poem. Quiet Night Thoughts. Before my bed, a patch of brilliant moon, so bright I took it for frost on the ground. Looking up, I gaze at that brilliant moon, and home floods the mind as I look down. also met many people from all walks of life and became famous for being able to make poems extemporaneously. He was asked to do this often and asked to come up with poems to encapsulate other people's feelings and tell their stories. The next ballad is a good example of how he lends his voice to others, in this case to a fisherman's wife in the village of Long Pole. Remember, this guy was only 26 when he did this. This is the second of the two ballads. Ballad of Long Pole. When I was a young girl in my father's house, I had no idea what smoke and dust could mean. Then I was married to my Long Pole man, and I learned to read the wind waiting at the beach. In the 5th month, when the south wind rises, my husband should be in Baling. In the 8th month, when the west wind rises, he must be leaving Yangtze Crossing. Tears on coming back, tears on leaving. He's gone more often than he's at home. I count the days, guess at his arrival at the lakes, and my dreams go ashore ahead of the waves. Last night, a wild storm erupted, blew down that tall tree by the river. Darker than the forest, the dark storm blew. What man can walk through that wind? Only floating cloud can forge the way to keep our date on Sweetgrass Island. Mandarin ducks waddling on our blanket, kingfisher birds swimming on the screen. How I wasted my 15 years, cheeks pink as a peach blossom then. Now I am a fisherman's wife, worrying about the winds, worrying about the waters. Mandarin ducks and kingfisher birds are patterns that you put on things that you give as wedding gifts. And floating cloud was a swift horse. I should have told you this before I read the poem, but good. After a couple of decades, Levi's fame finally reached the emperor, and he was summoned to court. His stay was brilliant and predictably short, partly because of his brilliance, which invited envy, and partly because he was a drunk, and his behavior unconventional and unruly. The following poem is really 3 little poems which I have called a suite. He was asked by the emperor to sing a song in praise of the emperor's favorite consort, Yang Guifei, a beautiful woman, comparing her to the much celebrated flower, the peony. Unfortunately for us, Austin is too hot to grow peonies. Believe me, I've tried many times. Anyway, Yang Guifei, one of the 4 great beauties of ancient China, is the Chinese face that launched 1,000 ships. In Chinese, we call such beautiful women kingdoms fall. That is to say, she is worth losing a kingdom for. This poem got Levi into a lot of trouble, but we won't worry about that today. Just enjoy the sensuous images. Chinese poetry is full of allusions and references. In academic writings, these would be explained in footnotes. In my books, I tell stories to give the reader the information. Most of these poems are not for one reading anyway, so my advice to you, for now, is to ignore what you don't understand on the first encounter, let it pass, just enjoy the sounds and sights in the poem. Come back to it another time, and another time, to appreciate the fullness of the experience. Consider this a first encounter. The cello song that will follow is a popular rendition written for the poem centuries later. Let me first prepare you for it with the poetry. A suite for my lady. Clouds envy the clothes she wears, flowers want her face. Spring wind, laden with dew scent, rises to embrace her. Should you miss her among the stars on the hills of jade, come to Moon Jade Terrace, where for you she is waiting. A luscious crimson branch, frozen scent mixed in dew, cloud and rain above which mountain, breaking hearts. Tell me, who can compare to her in all of Han's palaces? Perhaps only flying swallow, freshly made up at dawn. Fetid flower, kingdoms fall, delighting each to each. May he smile on you forever. You who can decipher the spring wind's endless longing and infinite desire, leaning on Aloe's wood terrace late into the scented night. As I said, Levi loved his wine, so it is no surprise that we find many of his poems with wine as theme. In fact, readers of his poetry have perpetuated the romantic story that he died from trying to scoop the moon out of the river while he was under the influence. So it would be negligent of me to not include at least one of his drinking songs in this program. The poem is called Drink With Me, which is likely written in 761 when he was 60. Following the younger Levi to the older one in Superstars, you will see how he goes from the empathetic and spirited young man through frustrated middle age into somewhat carefree, but also quite mad old age. This Drink With Me is from the latter, more mature Levi. Okay, now we get some little stories before the poem. Stone Tiger, in the second half of the poem, is a fierce and cruel king in the 3rd to early 4th century. And Gusu Terrace was the terrace the king of Wu built for Xixi, also one of the so-called 4 great beauties of China. Xixi's story litter Tang poetry. I am putting together all the little stories on it and around her in this series in a concluding little podcast which is still being recorded onto my website, www.susanwandolling.com. Anyway, here is the poem. Drink with me. Don't say no to my offer of wine. Look how the spring wind has come laughing. Peaches and blossoms are like old friends, poking their flower faces in my face. Orioles are calling from emerald trees. The moon is sticking her nose in my wine. Yesterday's rosy cheeks we thought would stay. Today our hair has turned more and still more gray. Thorns have overgrown on Stone Tiger's palace. Deer are running wild everywhere at Busu Terrace. Ancient monument of kings and princes all fallen down and turned to yellow dust. What reason can you give me for refusing my wine? Show me anyone from history who didn't have to die. Moving on, let's have a poem from his contemporary, Wang Wei, who is in Floating Clouds, the second volume. Wang Wei is known for his poems of retreat and reclusion, but today I shall just give you a poem he wrote for his friend, who was leaving for the frontier, which is called Sun's Gate, a mountain pass in the poem. Friendship and farewell songs are found often in classical Chinese poetry, and this Wang Wei poem has been set to music by quite a few. I shall first read you my translation, and then Dr. Gao will play you one of the popular tunes that was composed in the 18th century. Then we will sing it for you twice, so you can learn the song. So on the third go-round, you are invited to join in any way you can. A farewell song at the city of Wei, Weiqingqu. Morning rain has washed clean the dust-filled air. New willows by the guest house are green again. Come, have another drink with me before you go. Beyond Sun's Gate, nobody will know your name. Was 11 years younger than the last two poets. By the time he grew up, the period we call High Tang had begun to its decline. It was a long decline and began in what is called the Anlushan Rebellion. Long story short, many years of war and unrest followed, and Du Fu and his family was caught in it. And we have been left with many poems that have since become uber famous. I will introduce him to you, however, with a relatively unknown poem called My Sick Horse. Where is my sick horse? Oh, I see, okay. Which he wrote about his horse, who was his close companion for many years. I was moved to set this poem to Chinese music. Now, I've never written music before. as I find his feelings for his cause very similar to mine for my friend for 14 years, Coco, who was almost as big as a small horse. She died last September. Coco and I have not been to the frontier, of course, but we've been to many dog parks in Austin. My sick horse, Bing. You and I have been together for a good long time, stomping on the hilly slopes along the cold frontier. You've done all you can to stay useful and strong, just not strong enough to fight aging and disease. Nothing distinguished about your pedigree, but you have been loyal and obedient to me. A lowly creature with little import to anyone else, let me sing for you this sad and mournful elegy. And Chiwei has graciously agreed to play my song for Coco. Now for two monumental poems. One written when Du Fu was stuck in the besieged capital of Tang. It is called Spring View, Chunhuang. And the other, after years of poverty and war, during which one of his young sons died of starvation, called From a Height. Spring View. Our country is broken, the land remains. City in spring, locked in depths of green. Tears fall with petals in a gust of wind. Lingering birds call, startling the heart. 3 months running, 4 fires burned. I would give anything for word from home. This crop of white, thin from plucking, will soon be unable to hold a pin in place. I made 2 little drawings for you to show you what the last 2 lines are about. The old men in those days wore their hair up in a bun, in a knot. And then when they go to court, they pop a hat on top of it. So that's what he's talking about. He's plucking his hair because he's worried. And the bun one wasn't going to stay up. And Du didn't get to go to court much because he was totally unsuccessful in his own lifetime. Okay, where was I? The next poem. From a height, Dongao. Wind tight against a far sky. Gibbons howl, shrieking. Island cut out in white sand. Birds fly round in circles. Infinite woodland stripped bare in infinite silence. Endless the great river roars out its endless course. 10,000 miles of desolate autumn. I am still a guest. Age of disease, these 100 years, on the tower, alone. Thwarted, broken, bitter, wronged, frost at my temples. I am a stumbler, lately deprived, even of his cup of lousy wine. That's not sad enough for you. The next poem is by the Song Dynasty poet Li Qingdao, one of the acknowledged masters of the Ci lyric of the Song Dynasty, despite being a woman in that male-centric culture. Anyway, here she is mourning her husband, mourning her husband's death. And while you're still in a sad frame of mind, Qingwei will play for you Remo Giazzotto's Albinoni Adagio. Grief, picking, sorting in this icy cold, isolated, invisible, in the clutch of grieving. Sudden warmth in a still cold season, most impossible to rest. 2, 3 cups of watery wine. How fight that fast wind, impending night? And the geese fly past, just as the heart hurts, to see these old friends once again. The ground is covered, heaps of yellow flowers, shriveled wounds. Who picks from heaps? Watching at my window, alone, how live out the dark. And the wutong tree is heavy with small rain, and yellow dusk drip, drop by tedious drop. Such a state I'm in, can the one word sorrow suffice? Now for a poem by Bai Juyi in Friends and Lovers. It is called Pi Pa Song, and I have always thought of it as describing translation. You'll see why when I read you the poem. But first, let me show you what the Pi Pa looks like. It's an amazing instrument. This is Dr. Gao's friend. She is the principal pipa player for the Kaohsiung Chinese Orchestra. And this is just a tiny snippet. She can do so much more. Okay. Now back to Bai Ji's poem. A third of the way through, the poet shows off his knowledge of the pipa by using 4 technical terms: combing, spinning, ripple, and pick, just so you know what he's talking about when we get to it. Xunyang is in the Bugis, where he was exiled at the time, and Chang'an is the capital, where both of them want to go back to. That's all you need to know for this poem, because Bai Ji prides himself in writing poetry without using fancy language. He famously claimed that he wants old women and children, that is the unlearned, to be able to understand his verses, and was often seen reciting his poems to them to make sure that was the case. So he tells you what this poem is about in his preface. I shall just read that to you. Prologue. It was in the 10th year of Yuan Hong, 815, that I was demoted and banished to the county of 9 waters. The next autumn, I was seeing off a friend in Xunyang's river mouth of Pen. Through the darkness came sound of someone playing the pipa. So lively the sound, it reminded me of the capital. We requested a meeting and found out that she had once been a singing girl in Chang'an and studied under Master Mu and Master Chao. As she grew older and her beauty faded, she married herself to a merchant. I called for more wine and asked for a few tunes. At the end of her song, she reminisced about the happy days of her youth and how she came to be drifting on these desolate waters. It had been 2 years since I left the capital, and I thought I had learned to be content. But her words stirred in me once again the pain of exile. That night, I wrote this poem of 92 lines as a gift to her, calling it Pipa Song. And there will be no help for you with this long poem, so you just have to listen to the story. Late one evening, I came to see off a friend at the river mouth of Pen. Maples and bulrushes quivered in the desolate darkness as I dismounted. We started to drink and say goodbye, wishing for music to ease our pain as the moon sank lower and lower into the water. Drunk, yet not happy, how could I let him go? Suddenly, out of the water came notes of a pipa. I forgot about leaving, and my friend stayed on. Where did it come from? Who was playing? The music stopped, but no answer came. I called for more wine, had candles relit, and prepared to resume our farewell dinner. We paddled closer to ask for a meeting. Countless calls, more pleading. She finally came out, still carrying her pipa, half covering her face. As she tuned, turning pegs and strumming strings, melody yet to come, feelings flowed through. Her playing was calm, her singing composed, but together they told of a whole life's wrong. Lowered brows, sure hands, telling all, endless memories of the deep heart's core. Combing, spinning, ripple and pick, first rainbow skirts, then the green waist. Thick strings came crashing like rapid rain. Thin strings came cooing like intimate words. Crashing, cooing, clashed and merged, like pearls, great and small, falling on jade platters. As the twitter of orioles slid off flowers, underground waters rolled onto the shore. In the frozen spring water, her music paused, as if trapped in regret, unable to move on. Bitterness swelled in the ghostly stillness, this moment's silence surpassing sound. Then, like a silver vessel bursting open, iron riders charged out, clanging swords. The song ended with a slash across the heart, 4 strings, 1 voice like tearing silk. East boat, west boat, all was still. An autumn moon darted white on the river. Hesitating, as she put her instrument down, she straightened her dress, composed herself, and said, "I had come from the capital and once lived at the foot of Shama. By 13, I had mastered the pipa, coming first in my class at the Imperial Academy. Every tune I played, the experts applauded, and my beauty was the envy of all the girls. Young men from Wuling poured in with gifts. One song brought in rolls and rolls of red silk. Gold combs and silver pins jingled in rhythmic sway, and blood-red silk skirts were stained with spilt wine. 1 year's laughter tumbled into the next. Autumn moons, spring winds slipped away. Then my brother left with the army, and my aunt died. Dusk went, dawn came. Those colors remained, but at my front door, carts and horses stopped no more. No longer young, I became wife to a merchant. Profit means more to him than staying with me. Last month, he went off to Fuliang to buy tea, leaving me in this empty boat at the river's mouth. Around my boat, the moon is bright, the water cold, and deep in the night, dreams of my youth return to me. Those days of rouge dreams still flood my eyes. On hearing the pipa tell, I had sighed. Now hearing her story, I'm caught once more. Castaways, we drift together and part again. I know you well without knowing you at all. Since taking leave of the capital last year, I have been in exile, bedridden at Shenyang. Shenyang is barren country, no music all year round, no sound of string or pipe. I live in the damp lowland of the Pen River. Yellow reeds, bitter bamboos grow round my house. From dawn to dusk, what do I hear? The cuckoo spitting blood and the gibbons shriek. By spring rivers at morning and on autumn moon nights, I drink by myself and pour for myself. Mountain ballads and village flutes there are, but their crude clattering is hard to bear. Tonight, as your pipa spoke to me, like ethereal music, my senses cleared. Don't go, please sit and play another tune, and I'll write a poem for your pipa song. Deeply moved, she pondered my offer, then sat once more and ran the strings, pulling faster yet chillier than the tune before. Everyone secretly wiped their eyes, and who among them wept the most? This petty official's coarse robe was soaked. Now, for a change of pace, let's have one of the many angry poems by a young poet who died when he was only 26, unappreciated in his own lifetime. His name is Li He. We have paired his poem, Fall is Coming, with the first movement of Philip Glass's Songs and Poems for Cello Solos. And this time, the cello will go ahead of the poem. Well, it did last time too, didn't it? Anyway. But first, a little explanation for the last 2 lines of the poem, because I'm going to come in after she finishes. First, Master Bao. Bao is bowed up. who lived in the 5th century and is known for his food rhapsodies. He was, like so many of these great poets, frustrated in his political ambitions and wrote a group of poems called The Rugged Road. The verse Li He is referring to in this poem. That blood could turn to green jade after 3 years in the ground is from Zhuangzi, a Taoist philosopher, describing the blood of another aggrieved, virtuous man. It's coming. Wind rustles through the wutong leaves, coming at my warrior heart. Lamp burns low as I listen to the shuttle of crickets anticipating winter. Who will unfurl this bamboo scroll and read my writing? And how long will it take for worms to make holes and turn my work into a heap of dust? This miserable night and the thought of worms will surely pull my insides out. But wait, the cold rain brings a ghostly figure, an ancient come to comfort me. I hear voices singing from the grave, chanting Master Bao's rugged verse. 1,000 years in the earth must have turned his aggrieved blood to jade. To end this program, we will begin with Shuei's interpretation of Ryuichi Sakamoto's Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, to express some of the very complex emotions in these poems. And remember, the cello will be coming back after the third poem, so just to say goodbye. The poems are from one of the so-called late Tang poets. His name is Li Xiangyin, from Friends and Lovers, I believe. The first poem is for one of his many mysterious lovers. Some say a nun, some say a mistress of his patron, some say a princess or a princess concubine. In any case, all forbidden. Thus hard for them to be together, and without a title, Wuti. I call it Song Without a Name. The other poem, On a Rainy Night Sent to One in the North, is most likely addressed to his wife, whom we are told he nevertheless loved very much. Song Without a Name. Hard to see you, hard to let you go. East wind falters, all flowers die. Spring worms spin till their silk is spent. When wax turns to ashes, tears will dry. The morning mirror tells no lies. Night songs sharpen the moon's cold rays. Panlai is not so far from here. Go, go, my bluebirds, spy me out away. Panai, by the way, is paradise. Paradise because that is where his lover lives. The next poem is, let us assume, addressed to his wife, whom he had left up north at the capital, while he himself was sent south to the mountainous region of Mount Ba in the poem. The poem is made even more poignant by the fact that his wife had died after he left, though because of the distance and there being no cell phones at the time, Li Xiangyin did not know that he was addressing a ghost. On a rainy night, sent to one in the north. Ye yu qi bei. You asked me when I can come home, but I have yet no answer for you. Autumn rain on Mount Ba is flooding the rocky ponds and rivers tonight. I imagine the two of us sitting side by side at our window one day soon, trimming a candle, reminiscing about the night it rained so hard at Mount Ba. And to say goodbye, from the poetry anyway, here is a poem my mother was fond of quoting from in her later years. It's called Deng Le Yu Yuan, Pleasure Garden on the Ancient Plains. Restless and in a mood, I went out riding up to this garden with a celebrated view. The sunset wraps me in a lavish embrace, only to say that night is fast approaching.